everyone. My name is Christino. I am an assistant professor at the School of Nursing at University of Victoria in Canada. My circle of collaborators know me as the mom rage person, and the overarching aim of my program of research is to reduce maternal anger and depression after having a baby. Today, I'll be sharing some very, very preliminary findings from our nighttime parenting study, and I'll be presenting with our study's research coordinator, Caryn Dooner, who is a nurse and now a medical student at Queen's University. Before I delve in, I just want to acknowledge with respect the Lekwungen peoples on whose traditional territory the University of Victoria stands, and that I am currently on the unceded and traditional territory of the Coast Salish Musqueam Nation, also known as Vancouver. Caryn, I don't know if you want to pipe in with your quick land acknowledgement. Okay. Oh, you're still on mute. Okay. All right. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties, but I will proceed. We know getting enough sleep can be a major challenge in the postpartum period. Many women report nighttime as being lonely and difficult because they do the lion's share of nighttime care with feeding and settling their baby back to sleep during night wakes, which in turn disrupts their own sleep. We also know that prolonged poor sleep quality is associated with depression in mothers, and maternal depression in turn is a big risk factor for paternal depression, both of which can have adverse effects on children's development. I would argue that nighttime parenting is one of the more unexplored parts of early parenting. Most studies have focused on maternal perspectives, but experts in the field, such as Drs. Advi Sade and Chiara Baglioni, have called for a family-focused approach to studying sleep in the perinatal timeframe. So to give you some background, research indicates that cisgender heterosexual women are still doing the majority of infant care for both day and nighttime. According to Statistics Canada, women are providing about 65% of childcare, while male partners are generally doing about 35%. There's some emerging evidence that same-sex parenting partnerships are more egalitarian with regards to the division of infant care, and that's one of the things that we're looking at. There is robust evidence that overall greater paternal involvement in childcare is beneficial for children's development and outcomes. Evidence such as from Drs. Liat Tykotski and Annie Bernier suggests that paternal caregiving during nighttime is important for improving family sleep. And this is the core idea that we are examining in this study. It is unclear how much nighttime care that partners should be doing and the types of nighttime care that are associated with improved family sleep characteristics for mom, for partner, and for the baby. And when I say types of nighttime care, we've divided this into doing the bedtime routine, tending to infants during night wakes, or doing the early morning wake up with baby. We also wanted to know if there's a cost to partner sleep if they participate in more nighttime care. We hypothesized that greater partner nighttime care after controlling for the presence of an infant sleep problem would be associated with better family self-report sleep characteristics, especially for the mom and infant. And that partners doing the bedtime routine or morning wakes would have better sleep than partners who are getting up in the middle of the night to tend to infants. We also posed a qualitative question to find out how parents organize and negotiate nighttime care for infants. So we built a cross-sectional survey for couples with infants between 6 to 18 months of age, asking about parental division of day and nighttime care, parent-infant sleep characteristics, parent mood, and couples' relationship quality and coping. The survey was developed to be inclusive of all family structures, with a focus on same-sex and heterosexual couples. We mainly recruited using social media advertisements And we hit a bit of a lag with recruitment efforts and lots of issues with bots taking our survey. Our main challenge, though, was that although lots of mothers did take our survey, that didn't always mean that their partners would follow through and complete their survey, despite being invited and reminded. So when we turned to Natalie, she really helped us boost the smoother recruitment of couples through the Canadian Nanit email list. So our study is a little bit different than we didn't use the video data or the Nanit device, but it was nice to have access to this right group of participants who would want to participate in a study about infant sleep and family sleep. This was great because the data was high quality and we had way more couples buy in than with our regular social media recruitment strategy. From the sample of parent couples who completed our survey, we recruited a subset of couples to participate in a dyadic interview about how they negotiate sleep. Interviews were done using Microsoft Teams, and we're now coding that data for grounded theory analysis. So I'm going to turn it over to Caryn. I see that she's devised another way to hopefully speak, and she's going to share a bit of the data that we're seeing.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me now? Okay, I apologize. Just so many tech issues today. So again, I'm coming from near Toronto. So the Mississauga First Nation is where I'm located currently. And I'd like to acknowledge their unceded territory as well. So if we could go to just the next slide, thank you so much. So as Christine mentioned, our recruitment was done primarily through sort of like social media initially, and then Nanit, thank you so much, gave us a huge boost in recruitment. So I think roughly maybe a quarter to a third of our couples came from Nanit, which was great. And we did get a good number of couples. So if we go to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. So again, I'm just going to share some sort of initial like broad strokes of data that we've looked at. So demographically, we looked at a few things like income and sexual orientation of our participants. So I believe the average income of our participants was somewhere in sort of the low 100,000s, and this isn't per participant. This is what participants identified as their average household income every year. So low 100,000, maybe 110 was sort of the average. And then the average income of the NANA participants was a little bit higher, unsurprisingly. It's just good for us to sort of take note of what sort of socioeconomic status our participants have, because I think that largely has an impact on when people can go back to work, if they can afford to take leave, things like that. And seeing as this is a very international symposium, different countries have sort of different rules around maternity leave and paid leave and things like that, which can really have an impact on how and if care is split between parents. If we go to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. And we did have, I would say, like good representation from the LGBTQ community. We did have lots of unpaired participants, so sort of sets of parents where one half of the couple filled out the survey, but not the other half. So all of this data is just from sort of paired couples. So both halves of the couple filled out the survey. And like I said, we did have fairly good representation generally from the LGBTQ community, which is great for our analysis. Most of what we're going to talk about has to do with heterosexual couples, because that's just sort of where we started our analysis. And when it comes to inclusion of LGBTQ folks, there's just a very like theoretical discussion we need to have before we can code the data effectively to compare it. So we're still in the midst of doing that. So as you can see, the majority of couples that we sort of have data on right now are straight couples. If we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And unsurprisingly, the most common baby sleep location for sort of the infants that we were studying from age 6 months to 18-month-old was crib, which is in alignment with safe sleep guidelines for both America and Canada. And then again, parents' arms was like sort of the second most common, which I think anyone who's been a parent would probably confirm that those are two very likely sleep locations. And then sort of a few other responses indicating other areas or other places that babies might fall asleep or stay asleep overnight. If we could go to the next slide, please. So this is sort of just a preliminary slide that I wanted to include. And Christina sort of mentioned that it's, largely assumed that a lot of nighttime care is provided by sort of cis women in heterosexual relationships. And our study sort of confirms that in a preliminary sense. There is a largely significant difference in the amount of nighttime care provided by moms as compared to dads in heterosexual relationships. So I think it's nice to have stats to back that up. And then we also have some qualitative data that I'm going to discuss in a minute. And this isn't to say that every single couple follows these guidelines. Like there's definitely a few different couples that we interviewed where, you know, maybe mom went back to work and dad is the one that's staying home. And so dad is the one doing most of the nighttime care. But the majority of couples, I would say, sort of follow the general rule that mom is providing more of the nighttime care. So like I said, we'll head on to some qualitative sort of quotes that I wanted to just bring attention to because I think they speak to some of the thematic analysis that we're doing. So I'll read this out. This is a quote from one of the moms that we interviewed. She said, "I'm just going to do all the night wakings and then maybe he'll be able to reciprocate the next day and take on more of the duties during the day because he'll be refreshed and then we'll both get up." And he's like, "Man, I didn't sleep well last night." And I'm like, "Why? I did all of the baby stuff. I was the only one getting up. Why are you still tired?" And I'm sure you can empathize with this if you have a child. I can see some laughing faces. And the next one is from a dad, which I think this is from two different people in two different couples, but dad said, "I don't wake up at all unless I'm told or I'm asked for help." And I think it just speaks to the fact that there's often some apprehension towards acting, which again will be touched on in sort of the next slide in a second, but it also just, you know, obviously it's totally fine for people to not be well rested, but I'm sure it's very aggravating when you're the one that's up all night doing, you know, sort of the work at night, child rearing and things like that. And so we'll go on to the next quote because I think this also speaks to sort of the apprehension some partners feel towards acting. So this dad said, "You know, you're useless because you can't breastfeed and you know nothing's going to be accomplished. So just, you know, support the mother and, you know, worry about everything else." And this definitely speaks to another sort of theme that I noticed in a lot of our interviews and in some of the written responses from participants that breastfeeding sometimes just seems like a barrier. And especially with Canadian American guidelines, breast is best is largely sort of what is told to parents. Alternatively, fed is best. And I'm absolutely not endorsing anything by saying this, but a lot of parents identified that, you know, because you can't breastfeed, it seems like that might get in the way of you either getting up or acting or participating in nighttime care. And again, this is all very preliminary, but these are just some of the sort of themes that seem to be coming out from the interviews that we've done. And then I think there's one more quote on the next slide. And this is from a dad that had noticed that mom was maybe not coping well and doing a lot more than maybe mom should have been doing. So dad said, "I said, you're not coping, you're stressed out, you're not sleeping, like you're getting 3 hours of sleep a night, you're falling apart here. You're eating a ton because you're so tired or trying to stay awake." Yeah, so that conversation happened. And then the happy sleeper conversation happened. And this sort of led into a discussion about their sleep training method and their sleep training sort of perspective. And this is, I think, more of an example of a partner that's wanting to intervene and focusing on communication, which is another theme that really came out when we were talking about just sort of how people divide their nighttime care and what that looks like. Communication seems really important. And then also other factors that play into things, like I mentioned before, sort of that apprehension and like a lack of willingness to act. Like they want to act and they want to be involved, but for whatever reason, be it viewing breastfeeding as a barrier or other things, they just don't follow through in acting. So we can go to the next slide. And this is just a final sort of broad strokes overview. This little graphic just illustrates some of the themes that we've been working on developing through our grounded theory analysis. And thank you all for listening and for your time. And I hope it was useful.
Amazing. Thanks, Christine. Thanks, Caryn. It was so wonderful to be able to help you in the recruitment of this study, and to particularly be able to, target our Canadian user base, who are, a very, very engaged group of folks and very willing to participate in research studies. So I'm so happy that that was helpful to you. So thank you so much. We're really looking forward to seeing, the further results of this study.